Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for giving up your time and coming along. I'm fully aware from travelling around state and over the last 3 years since we've started working towards a new syllabus and a new program for next year that most concern has been around Units 3 and 4, Ethics and Integrity, in particular in Unit 3 and the new tactical awareness stuff. And lots of the feedback right from the start of syllabus writing was around those two units and what they would look like. And lots of the focus around PD has been on those two things. They're our first two summative pieces of assessment when you hit Year 12, and they're the newest content out of the whole 2 years worth of subject matter. So there's lots of concerns about what they would look like, what the learning experiences might be, how can you integrate the subject matter into what you're doing outside, and what's the best way to attack that. So I've got about 50 minutes or an hour, and there is no way that I'm going to be able to give that the full requirement that it needs, but what I'm going to try to do is just give a little bit of an insight into both of those different areas of subject matter so that hopefully you could think about what you might be able to take away, how you might, if you do choose this textbook, how you might use the textbook in your classroom but also outside of your classroom. Obviously I've had planned little Babbington competition. Haven't got the greatest space for that, so I'm modifying as we go this afternoon, but I will ask some of you to be involved. We'll try and do some little integrated activities so that we can bring some of the subject matter to life. And really they're things that lots of us already do in our classrooms, and maybe it's just a matter of adjusting our vocabulary to integrate the right subject matter at the right time with our students, and using that inquiry process to help draw out the learning that we want to see happening. So if you received a raffle ticket, can I ask you to come down this end, please? You might want to limber up a little bit. I don't want any strained hamstrings. If you do have any injuries, you don't have to participate. I'm not forcing you. Okay, so how many got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exactly how many I meant to give out. We're just going to have a little warm-up, little practice. So we're going to do a little walking race. From one end at our starting line to the red line is the finish line. Can I have the adjudicators on the side? You need to point out if people are running. We want proper walking technique. Okay, we're ready to go? On our marks. Get set, go. Ah, there we go. All right, now on the way back, have you got your raffle tickets? Come back to the starting line. That was our warm-up. So this one's for the prize. Raffle ticket in. Ping pong ball out. There's ping pong balls in there. Yeah, I'll pull one out. So from the starting line, can you read what's on your ping pong ball and make the adjustment to where you need to go? That's how many steps you will take. That's your starting point. Ukraine -2. Oh.
India +2.
You can take big steps. Take advantage. Oh, no, you took 2 now. That's it. It's over.
Australia +5.
+5. Oh. She learnt from you. Was that was 6?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
I have long legs.
Oh. So this is how we start. Oh, what do we got? -2. Saudi Arabia. Okay. So we're going for the prize this time. This is our Olympic walking grand final. Everyone set? She's going to get you.
Yeah, you didn't tell me I have to take 6 steps.
Oh. On your marks. That's what we just did. Set. Go. Winner! Round of applause. You'd have a few little prizes.
Lucky dip?
Yeah, you can lucky dip. Skipping. Oh. Okay, round of applause. Back to your seats, please. Yeah, I'll come and get them. Everybody in the room, on your little whiteboard, I'm going to ask you 3 questions in a moment. And on your little whiteboard, I want you to write 3 numbers. 1 is if you're answering no, 2, not really, 3, somewhat, 4, mostly, 5, yes. So I need 3 numbers. Was the race, not the warm-up, was the race fair to everybody, including you sitting in the spectating 1 to 5? Nice and big, but you'll need to fit 3 numbers on there. Question 2. Did the race promote enjoyment, engagement for all of those here? Not just the participants, but all of those here. But including Saudi Arabia. And who was the other one at -2? Ukraine. Did the race and its organisation display integrity by moi, the event organisers? So the first 10 or 15 minutes this afternoon, I'm going to work within ethics and integrity. And we'll go into some badminton and then we'll move on into tactical awareness with badminton as well. But what you should have now is 3 numbers written there. Can I get you to hold up those 3 numbers so I can have a look at what people thought? 2s, 3s, 1s. All right. Can I ask you, if you were one of the participants, can you just put down your whiteboard? Can I just see the spectators' points of view, please? All right, spectators, can you put your numbers down? Can I see the participants' point of views? Okay. So the whiteboards and things like that, I've had lots of questions lately around how do we collect primary data. We're meant to be engaging students in our classrooms and outside of the classrooms, collecting primary data about their understanding and about engaging them in with the subject matter. So very simple strategies I've written up, or I put up on the board there. What I could simply do with my iPad is, as you are holding up your boards, I could be just going around recording that for later so that I can take those away and do something with them. You can use your phone, your iPad, camera to get all of those things. You could get the students to enter in a survey monkey depending on how tech savvy your school is and how many people have laptops or how many people are allowed to use their phones. Plickers is down the bottom. So if you went to the QCAA in service where they got plickers for the responses to some of those questions, instead of A, B, C and D, you could just say 1, 2, 3 and 4. And just get them to hold it up appropriately. Real life, if you're in an area like a Babbington with a projector screen next to your court, works really well, the plickers, or old-fashioned pen and paper. So depending on whether you need that data, they're really handy out on the oval. But if you want to record it and keep it for later, taking a snapshot's really easy. I would get my students then, or one of my students, to go home and graph that up. So I might give them the pictures. So it was a walking race fair. There's our data that we can talk about in the next lesson. That wasn't your data, I made that stuff up. We're not that far. Did the walking race promote enjoyment and engagement? Did the walking race display integrity? So that notion of we can get them out really simply and doing something as easy as that and get into collecting some information around ethics and integrity. What I'm leading to with the subject matter with this really is, how does this relate to the notion of fair play? So one of the big key aspects in ethics and integrity in the new syllabus is around the notion of fair play, what fair play is, how we see fair play, how we can promote fair play, and how it is inclusive and how it promotes engagement and enjoyment for the people who are playing. So we can do lots around fair play and that notion. So some of the things I asked in my questions were enjoyment, engagement. I didn't ask about confidence, but that could be another one that I ask about. And just putting them in a situation in a really simple environment where we can just get them involved with introducing the subject matter. The learning goal might be, or what I'm trying to head towards, is how does fair play establish integrity for sport, sporting organisations and sports people? So the activity I did might take 10 minutes in class. This might be 2 or 3 lessons away where we're getting the students to answer that question. That's what we're heading towards. And over a number of little activities like this, we can engage the students realistically in terms of making them experience what it is. The people who were Australia up the front, they got to win. Yay, they loved it. People down the back did not. People didn't get a chance to even participate. Usually don't. Finding something that motivates students in your PE class will be handy with ethics and integrity. The more I wrote about this, the more I came to understand if you can put students in an environment where they're actually competing for something, then they tend to try a little bit harder, and it actually hurts a little bit when they lose, and that's part of the learning experience that you need to get them involved with. So if you in a department have the capabilities to buy some trophies that you might be able to use, or recurring ones, or little rewards, so there's a tangible thing at the end. So the students can go, yeah, I won and I actually enjoyed that because I had but wait up, I had 5 more steps and they didn't. Was that fair? How do I feel about winning when I'm not fair? Because some of your students will go, I didn't like that. And some will go, yeah, it's brilliant. And that leads into the bigger question in the syllabus, is that how does it promote and sustain confidence in physical activity within Australia? How does that notion of fair play, everybody enjoying, everybody involved, inclusive, diverse, or allowing for diversity, how does that promote confidence in Australian sport, and why is that important for us as Australians? To relate that back to the textbook, lots of the subject matter are grouped together in chunks. For example, fair play. And these are all listed in the subject matter as things to do with fair play to explore. So what we've tried to do throughout the textbook is where we get to a section, or lead off a section, we've tried to create diagrams that are simple and can give you an overview of everything you're going to go through. A place for students to go back to and go, oh, I know where this bit fits in. It's part of the bigger picture. We also have throughout the chapter little key messages. So you'll go through 2 or 3 pages, and then just to make sure students are on the right track, did they understand the essential bit that they just read about and they just engaged with? Every 2 or 3 pages we have these little things that we call key messages. They're what you want to get out of that bit. We might have 3 across a page. So I work for 2 pages. Here are my 3 key takeaways to help students understand this is what I need to understand, this is what I need to know for my piece of assessment. Like most textbooks, we have check-ins, so questions along the way where they can interact with the knowledge, simple recall, simple explain type questions, did I get that bit? The other things we have are engaging activities. So what we just did was an engaging activity. Little tips or little tricks, little learning experiences along the way that introduce new knowledge or allow you to test new knowledge that you just spoke about. Get them out of the classroom and go, I want to start students engaging with this, let's put them in and get them to do. And we've called those engage-ins. So we've got check-ins along the way, we've got engage in, get outside and do something with the subject matter. They're little things, they have icons that help relate back to the cognitions in the syllabus so that you know when you do this activity, we should be expecting them to do these things in the activity. Typically with our engage-in activities, we'll try to also give you a bit of an idea about what to do with the primary data that you collect. So we get you outside, give you something to do, here's what you can do with it. That analyse phase. How can I display it? Getting students engaged with the data that they've collected, not just going outside and doing that activity and going, let's move on to the next thing. Teaching them those analytical skills. The last thing in our engage in, you can only see step 1 and 2. After they've done this, at the end of our engage-ins, we have 2 or 3 little steps that help them to evaluate and justify what they just learnt. So we go outside, we do it, we give them a way to collect that data and analyse that data, and then we give them something at the end to do. These things typically take a lesson, lesson and a half, 2 lessons, to engage with a chunk of subject matter. What we were just working on was starting with the notion of fair play, fair competition, in this case integrity and experiencing excellence and joy. We've got to keep working along that theme in a moment and look at even distribution of technology and how does that affect the legitimacy of competition. But does anyone want to answer that question? Because I use countries and some people had advantages and some people didn't. And the question at the end of that activity to the students might be, how did that activity actually demonstrate fair competition that is meant to be at the Olympic Games? Is it fair competition at the Olympic Games? Consider these things before you respond, students, and then pose that question as an ethical dilemma. Do athletes at the Olympics all begin from an equitable position on the starting line? And you can have a big tangent on what may or may not get them to that starting line. How much money does USA put in there? How much money does Australia and England put towards their teams? In particular with this one, how much technology do they have advantage of in their institutes, in their training facilities? Do their coaches use, as opposed to some of the other countries? And then you can ask the question, does it matter? Ethiopia has huge amounts of medals compared to some of the more financial countries. What are they doing in their programs? Or is it only one certain type of sport, long distance running? So you can go off on a whole heap of little conversations to ask students to get engaged, or in different groups you could assign them different things to explore in relation to that question. All around the notion of how is technology evenly distributed, and does it actually lead to a legitimate and equitable competition? You can bring in heaps of other things. Some of you might have seen this one floating around Facebook and on the internet. I think it's in National Geographic. This is Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe won 100 and 200 sprints at the 1912 Olympics. On the morning of the finals, his shoes were stolen. So he wandered around the Olympic village back in those days. He found a set of shoes, but they weren't a pair. So he's got 2 different boots on. And because this one was too big for his foot, he had to wear 3 pairs of socks. He still won the Olympics in the 100 and 200. That's the Fijian rugby team. I'm quite sure you could find some comparable footage of an Australian team or an English team with all of their vests on and their heart rate monitors and compare, and then have a conversation about equitable distribution of technology. If you're really good and you've got the time, take them outside, get them to do stuff like that. They'll probably enjoy it more than normal training, just for the novelty factor. But if that was your elite team as a country and that's what they had to train with in order to compete on a world stage, how equitable is that competition for them and their ability to succeed? Let's play some badminton. I am going to need 2 volunteers. 1 for each end. Works best like that. Can I get 2 badminton players, please? You don't even have to be badminton players, because we don't even really have a court. Thank you very much. Rightio. Can I get you to scissors, paper, rock? Now, this was the most tricky thing at the last session. We couldn't get scissors, paper, rock. Way we go. See? We'll go again. There's one go. Scissors, paper, rock. Oh, winner. Okay. Pick your weapon. You can serve though, I'll let you do that.
Oh, this is embarrassing.
Okay, so our makeshift badminton court, we'll have to watch the lights. Not too high with the clears. Back line is the markers for our walking race, and then we sort of have our thirds, which we'll use later. Please be careful of the people on the side. Let's play a couple of points. Oh. Oh, nasty. Wasn't ready for that one. Is that cheaper? Can I get rackets that way? Yeah. One more. Got him this time. Round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. If you can imagine, you've got your whole class. Oh yeah, give him a prize. Give him a prize. Yep. Give him a prize. I know when I have badminton in my classroom, we've got like 4 or 5 courts and we play king of the court and we move up and we move down. So what you can do really simply is give half the class plastic rackets, the other half, or each court a set of plastic rackets and each court a set of good rackets. When they move up and down, scissor, paper, rock. That's who gets it. Losers got plastic, winners have got the proper ones, and play a lesson like that. See how they like it. Again, prizes for the winner at the top of the king court works really well. It's fine for a lesson, they'll enjoy the novelty of that. If you stop halfway through and then go, right, that's it, if you've got plastic rackets, that's what you've got for the rest of the lesson. They'll get a little bit more annoyed with that, particularly if it's the wrong people who have got it. So pick your students when you say it. And sometimes, hopefully, the plastic rackets will work their way to the bottom and the better rackets will work their way up, but not all the time. So it sort of demonstrates that Olympic idea as well. Sometimes you can overcome adversity even with a plastic racket. And you can work like that for a couple of lessons with that notion of how does technology affect the legitimacy of competition. And at the end of every lesson, you can debrief. How did that affect your enjoyment? Who had the plastic rackets? Did you give up at some point? Did you lose 2 games and then go, oh, because you'll have kids who want to go and sit down. I'm not playing with this. But that's what the experience is about. One of the best things I think about ethics and integrity and the other unit, I've got a mental blank. No, not the tactical awareness. One of the other... Barriers and enablers, thank you very much. The barriers and enablers unit. The best things about those 2 topics is that you don't have to integrate them the whole time with one physical activity. So you can skip between a walking race and badminton in order to prove your point, in order to engage them in the subject matter and get some experiences. You might want to, in the end, head in one direction to enable them to speak and gather more data in order for them to do an assessment piece. But engaging them in a range or a variety, as the syllabus says, is really important for them to experience a number of different elements. So we're back to our no, not really on your whiteboards. Here's our question. Was that a legitimate tournament? 3, 2, 1. Second question. Would it encourage engagement? That was what we had. If you turned up at a tournament every week and you had the plastic racket, would you want to continue? No, not really, somewhat, mostly, yeah. Would this be fair in a PE class? If we had 20 kids and I had 10 of those rackets and 10 of those rackets, and I just went, our finance just can't stretch. So you guys are going to share around the plastic rackets. And then you got halfway through and went, well, wait up. The C students, you use the plastic ones because you're not getting any better anyway. Better guys, you use these ones. I did that with my basketball guys today. In year 10, we're doing a unit like this. And with my basketball guys, I went, rightio, we've got about 2 lessons left. I'm going to mark you today. You guys are already C's. You guys are B's. There's no A's in this class. We played for 20 minutes. I ignored the C's. I made them sit on the... And then we played B's versus B's. They didn't like it. They got the point at the end, though, that, we need to make sure that there's fair play because in terms of engagement and encouragement and enjoyment, all those principles around fair play, they didn't like it when they were ignored. They didn't like it when things weren't going their way. And they didn't like it that they didn't get the same amount of attention, which is what fair play is all about. The other thing we have in the textbook at the end of our chapters are what we call active investigations. So we have engage-ins along the way, and at the end we have a section where it's full of active investigations. So in our textbook, chapters are broken into 2 chunks. The first chunk is full of subject matter and explanations of them and the little engaging activities that will get them out and starting to engage with that content. Teaching them how to explain, teaching them how to apply that knowledge. The second part of the chapter, we've put together the inquiry processes stage 2 and 3. Because if we look at the syllabus, it's actually hard to write something where you segregate them out. Lots of it's do something and collect data, and then it's evaluate the data. So those things go together typically in our classrooms. So in order to help you engage, the second part of our chapter is nowhere near as long, but it's probably 3 times as important. Because these active investigations are all your inquiry questions. For most chapters, there's 5 or 6 of them, and each one of them could take you a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on what you wanted to target. And each one of them could be turned into an assessment instrument on its own. They're designed to take students through the whole inquiry process. They're extended investigations where they're collecting data over a number of lessons. They allow for the collection of authentic primary data that you can then use in an assessment item or that you can interrogate back in class. They provide students with the opportunity to develop justifiable response to the inquiry question. And as I said, they help you design your assessment instruments. So this one here is one from the ethics and integrity. And the bit we would add into what we just did was then the ethical decision-making framework. And as I said before, we like our diagrams that help students engage with the knowledge that they need to know. So you might have 2 or 3 weeks where you're saying, how do we develop, using the ethical decision-making framework, a badminton tournament within our class that is equitable and displays integrity allows for diversity, different ability levels, and makes everyone feel the enjoyment of being involved in physical activity. That in itself is difficult because that's what sport aims to do, and every club and every organisation struggles with all of that. But you give students in groups or as a whole class time to develop, work through the framework, develop their competition, implement the competition, reflect on it. That's 3 weeks worth of work, but it turns into your assessment item. And as I said, there's a number of different things you could do around that. They don't have to do it with their own class. If you're lucky like we are, I'm at a school that's prep to 12, so we could be implementing badminton to beginners in grade 5. You could be implementing them to your grade 9 classes. So little groups can be implementing competitions with different PE classes at a younger year level. And then you ask them, did you enjoy that? You look around and they should be looking around. Oh, there's 4 kids sitting out over there. Why are you sitting out? Go and talk to them. I don't enjoy this. Why don't you enjoy it? I don't feel like I'm losing all the time. Okay, well, how can we adjust that? How can we adjust what we do? So those authentic opportunities for students to get involved with creating, using the ethical decision-making framework, creating enjoyment through physical activity and dealing with the ethical dilemmas that normal clubs deal with every weekend. And it doesn't have to be about technology or game setup. It can be with codes of conduct and how people display integrity on the field. Or it can be with parents, or it could be with other students in the class where they're making codes of behaviour that they expect people to follow. And you can see those activities then hit great portions of the syllabus objectives. To move, we'll use badminton still as our stimulus, but we'll move in to start to look at Unit 1, Topic 1, motor learning, and then we'll go into the tactical awareness stuff. I'm not sure how much coaching background you've had. Certainly when we started looking at writing this syllabus, I didn't know a lot about tactical awareness, and I've learned a lot in the last 4 years about what it is. And I've adjusted my coaching accordingly with a lot of my teams, and the way I teach PE probably has changed quite a lot too. So I'll start with rate limiters, which is identified in the syllabus. And they identify 6 different areas that can restrict a person's learning or the success they show on a sporting field. Technical, tactical, perceptual, physical, psychological, and physiological. So if I stop learning, if I hit a brick wall and I don't get any better, one of these things is going to be hindering me, or multiple things are going to be stopping me from progressing, either with my coach at training or when I get on the field. If I keep making the same mistakes and I haven't got better over the last season, what is it that's stopping me from going forward? We've developed this notion of a self-analysis hexagon. So you should have been given one of these to work with. And again, we're working with badminton. What I want you to do is have a think about your own badminton play. And just like I've done here with the highlighter, maybe not 4 in the time that we've got, maybe 2 or 3. If you look at the things that are listed in each of the 6 quadrants and just think about your own badminton skill and highlight 2 of the things that you think are really affecting your badminton play. Now, if you haven't played a lot of badminton, think about the things you might be struggling with, if you did. So we've developed one of these for every physical activity that's in the senior syllabus. So that if you get the teacher resource package, you'll be able to have access to one of these for athletics, badminton, basketball, whatever it is that you will do. They're based on the elective parts at the back of the syllabus. So where it's got the technical, tactical and perceptual things, they're the things straight out of the back of the syllabus that you're expected to teach around specialised movement sequences and tactical awareness. So what we've done is put them on here. And then we've included the aspects of physical and psychological, and these come straight out of the syllabus around the sports psychology unit. So it doesn't matter what subject matter you're doing. When you're engaging them with a physical activity, I always start a unit by getting them to reflect on this, right at the start. Think about how much they've played before. Most of us are setting up our students by teaching the physical activities we're going to do in 7, 8, 9 or 10. So they should have a little bit of an understanding about where their strengths and weaknesses lie. What we're asking to do is identify what weaknesses they might have coming into this section, which is what we're required to do by the syllabus. Then what we would get them to do is we get them to play. So over a series of lessons over 4 or 5 weeks, when you're inside doing subject matter or when you're outside, we would get them to be thinking about the things that they identified. We would get them to use other gameplay analysis instruments, so other GPAIs. And there's a few of these in the teacher resource package too, and I've given you a couple there this afternoon. So let's play. Okay. Now when you start students off with this process, it's quite tricky because as you will see on your sheet, can you look at your sheet because you're the ones who are going to be evaluating what you're seeing. You will see there's a lot of information here. This GPAI is geared up to look at shot success. Some of the other ones we put in there look at shot distribution around a court, look at unforced errors, look at where you're hitting your shots from, look at where your shots are landing on the opponent's court. So there's lots of things you could analyse over that 4 or 5 weeks from where they start while they're playing. So they don't just have to be outside, or they shouldn't just be outside playing badminton. They should be analysing using a GPAI pretty much constantly, using a variety of them, collecting that primary data. And when they start, they're pretty tricky. This one's shot success. So when we look at a forehand clear, what I've done is identified what success means. Success doesn't mean win a shot. My forehand clear should go to the back of the court, which is where I put the white markers. So if I was watching my partner who was playing, I would judge a successful clear as one that goes all the way to the back. If it falls short, it's not successful because it's not going to where it needs to go tactically. So we would mark successful or unsuccessful. Backhand clear, same thing. I need it to go to the back of the court. My smashes or my drop shots, are they falling in front of the red markers? Because if I'm doing a drop shot and it's going to the middle of the court, I'm going to get it smashed back at my face. It's got to land here. So that's a successful one. So as they play, you would have a partner ticking off, and then they can swap over. They might play a game till 11. It's pretty full on to have someone, it's hard. So it takes a couple of lessons for them to be able to do it. So if I get you to watch and just take some notes on how we're going. Here's the back strip of our court for our clears to go to. Here's the middle of our courts. Here's the front of a court for a drop shot. Let's just play a couple of points and see how you can track. Oh, we're playing off the roof too. You've got to adjust for off the roof. Oh. Forehand serve. Oh, that was nice all the way to the back. That was in, by the way. Oh. Whoa, wide.
Too aggressive.
Oh. Yell out, please, if you're going to get... Oh, in. That's my next point, yeah.
You need some more height.
Whoa, over the lights and in. Forehand clear all the way to the back court, success. Ooh, all the way to the back. Oh, in, off the roof. That's a clear winner. Last point. Out. Thank you. Give him a round of applause. Okay. Ooh, thank you. And collect a prize. Okay. Anyone got any feedback on what they saw? We only played 6 shots. Was there anything you could draw a conclusion about the success in that range of time? Anything that worked for a player? No, I should have told you you needed to only focus on one end, not both. So you should have focused on one player that you were recording data for. What you can do, obviously, is instead of having a partner record that. What was the suggestion? Your video. So if you've got people, and again, it depends on phone policies and the amount of iPads and things like that you have, but your partner could be just there. And then they get the footage at the end of the lesson and they go home and they spend 20 minutes that night reviewing a game to 11. They can freeze it, they can look at what shot they're doing, they can note whether it's successful or not, and that's a lot more productive in terms of getting some real data that they can use. So it depends on your class. Again, it depends on what you want them to do with the data. It depends on, have they been flat out the whole time, so you actually want them just to enjoy some playing for a lesson, so not think too intensely about it, or do you want them actually to collect that data ready for an assessment piece, and you want them to go away and analyse it properly. I tend to think the video idea is what you would do. After your 4 or 5 weeks, if you didn't do this step, to start with, get them to reflect, and then get them to gauge the degree to which that aspect is affecting their performance. Because if I asked you to select 4 things from those lists, your 4th thing might not actually be that bad. You might have found a way to cope with a poor smash, or you might have found a way to get around a poor backhand. I can run around it and hit it. So it's something that I'm not good at, but realistically in my overall game, it's not affecting me too greatly. But what you would get students to do is to identify the ones that are significantly impacting on their performance and their learning, what's stopping them from getting better. Ideally, then you get them to focus on that. Send them away, get them to Google. I've got a really bad backhand clear. Right, go and find what makes a good clear. There's heaps of teaching videos on the internet. Or your assessment task is design a training strategy that's designed to overcome the flaw that I have. Once you've identified it, they've collected the primary data, now they've got to design something and you've got to get them to review whether that's improved.
Ross, I'm just wondering whether with the tactical, you know how it's very popular to have heat maps these days.
Yep.
Where the bird is pretty much going. I mean, often students just tend to sort of gravitate to the middle of the court, and that's where most of their shots will
Yep.
go. So that would be, I guess, another one.
So when you get, depending on your unit, because you could do the same thing, as I said, with any unit. So you might go down here. When you're doing your sports psychology, once you do this, you go, my focus is all over the place. So for the sports psychology unit, I'm going to develop a strategy to improve my focus. If you are doing the tactical awareness stuff, then yes. You go, well, I'm stuck in the middle of the court. And where I lose some spatial awareness. When I get over here to my backhand, I don't know how to get back there. So this is what I found with my analysis. And I picked out one shot that's holding me back. Because you can't change everything, and if you're asking an assessment piece, you're not going to ask them to change everything, you're asking them to pick one thing. Here's what the data showed me after 3 weeks of collecting data. I rarely use my backhand clear, it's underutilised. It's not deep enough, I always leave it short, and I find a lot of shuttles coming back at me really fast because I don't get it back there. And the tactical awareness thing with Babbington is push them back. That's what you're aiming to do in the syllabus. I produce a lot of unforced errors when I go here. I miss-hit shots and they don't even get over. They're mostly unsuccessful based on the analysis that we just used. And because of that, I'm not confident with it. So my job would then to be is, how do I fix that? I know what the problem is now. How do I fix it? I need to know why. Is it a technical error, a tactical error, or a perceptual error? And all of these 3 things are important in tactical awareness. So we have moved on now to looking at the tactical awareness unit. As I said before, is it a problem with my footwork? I just can't get into the right position to hit a backhand. So what I do, because I'm pretty agile and they're pretty slow, I just run over here into forehand. But I never actually use it. And when I do have to use it, I get all tangled up and it's really bad. So I don't use it in a match. That's why I have to practice at training or in coaching. So is it my footwork? Technical error. Is it actually my wrist flick? It's not my footwork, I can get there okay. It's my power, or it's my trajectory. Maybe it's a combination of this. Technically, I haven't developed it because I don't use it very much, but also in terms of perceptual and tactical, I don't pick up. Like I'm really slow to get over here, I don't realise it's going that way. and then I'm really slow to move. So my affordance recognition, we would call it, recognising my opportunity to use a shot, might be poor. The opportunities, when the shuttle comes over, I have to make a decision. Do I use a forehand? Do I use an underarm? Do I drive? Do I go to a backhand? All of those options are what we would call affordances, the options that we have when we see the shuttle coming at us. For me, maybe I just don't recognise the right time to use my backhand. I don't perceive that shuttle's in the right spot. And that's something you need to work on then, to recognise in your decision making when to go and when not to, in order to be successful. We look at the two models that are in the syllabus. If I was to apply a cognitive systems approach to improving that error, what I might do is just automatically go, I'm really bad at my backhand, I'm just going to do some maths practice. I'm going to sit here for a lesson, and you teach your kids like that. You know, you're bad at your backhand, go over there with 100 shuttles and just bang, bang. Get your technique right. Once you get your technique right, cognitive system approach would say, well, we advance down the road. So what we're going to do is then put that, try to work on our motor plan into different situations. So we're not going to sit here and just hit clears all day. We might get us to move some forward and some backwards. We might work on that, and then we put it into a game a little bit. So I'm trying to encourage them to go to one side. We slowly get better and work towards autonomy, but we sort of never get there in a classroom environment. Eventually, as we get more successful, I feel a little bit more confident and I use it a little bit more in my gameplay. But this approach, results will show, are slower than the new dynamic systems approach. Slower in terms of development of learning and retention of learning and success. So in a dynamic systems approach, when you spot an error, if you use this notion, you can develop your technical with your tactical and perceptual all at the same time. And by making those links all at the same time, you use them more in gameplay and they're more successful in gameplay. So what we might do is manipulate our authentic environment to ensure that the learner is always thinking about using that backhand clear. And if I can develop the technical and the tactical elements through those learning experiences by forcing them to use that backhand clear, then they're going to transfer it into gameplay a lot quicker and have a lot more success. And that sort of underpins why dynamic systems approach is more recognised now as a better way to develop learners. That leads us into the constraints section. Constraints are the boundaries we can place on a learning activity. Oops. And I wanted to highlight that. Learners self-organise their movement patterns. If I put a kid into a situation, they work out what to do for themselves. And if I let them play enough badminton, they'll work out how to do their backhand. But it might take them 3 or 4 years, and we don't have 3 or 4 years. So we want to try and use constraints to our advantage to force them to think about that backhand clear so that they're progressing quicker. There's a number of different types of constraints. So we've got task constraints, learner constraints, and environmental constraints. Again, they're the different boundaries we can place on the learning environment. What I want you to think about on constraints, they naturally exist for the learner already. So if you look at these, the learner already has their height, their limb, their fitness levels, their technical skills. They come with those things. So they're already faced with limits that they have to, or constraints that they have to work within. If you're not tall, you're never going to be able to jump high enough to get to the back clear. So you've got to find a way to overcome that constraint about your physicality. But you can also use the constraints to your advantage as a coach to help guide the learning experiences for the player or for the student. So has anybody very quickly got any suggestions? If I want to make a student fix their backhand clear, how could I modify the size and shape of my badminton court, the goal that I want them to do, the rules of the games, or the skill How can I modify those things to force them to think about using it or using it?
Clear?
Good. So if you win using a backhand clear and it's in the right area, you get 2 points. You can make it the only way to score a point. So you can play all the rallies you want, but unless you win a point using a backhand clear, you don't win a point. These are things we've been using as teachers to encourage development for a while now, for a long time. It's about pointing out to students why you're doing that and about engaging them with creating them for themselves. How can they manipulate these to get improvement within their badminton performance for themselves? So yeah, I've developed these for my badminton class that work on a range of different constraints. So we put 8 courts out, I just throw these around. If you guys are having trouble with your backhands, go to that court, play like that. If you're having trouble with your clears, got to keep it in the back. You only score points when they're in the back. Then you can start to put people together. So people with their forehand problems and people with their backhand problems can only play down one side. We're doing forehands, the other guy's doing backhand, backwards and forwards. So you can keep swapping kids around. Drop shots and clears. So one's back here, doing drop shots over the net, trying to get it. The other one's right at the front, trying to get their net lifts right to the back. The key to this, obviously, is you don't want them just to stand here, because you can stand here all day and hit it. You actually require them to think about, well, this goes as part of a larger point, a larger rally. So I always put in there, they have to return to the central position. So if I'm doing this, if I go back to practice my clear, to stay in the point, I have to come back to the central position before I can hit my next shot. So you're working on the footwork and the technique and the tactical use all in the same activity. On the cards, I try to give them a range of things, and I don't try to limit it to just, okay, we're just going to do backhand to backhand. Because it takes away the decision making. When do I use a clear and when do I use a drop shot? I can get to here and go, well, I want you to use the backhand, but even if I want them to work on their clear, I don't take the drop shot out of play. Because that's the perceptual, the recognition of when do I use it. So I don't restrict their decision making so refined down that they don't get to make a decision about when to use that skill and when to hit it. Because if that person does drop one short, why would I can just kill it. I don't want to take that out of their learning. Again, tactical awareness, same thing. Little activities like that along the way are included as engaging in the textbook to get them to think about how can I apply a constraint to do one thing, to help demonstrate or introduce the notion of what constraints are. Let's get them out, really simple context, work with what a constraint is, change the scoring system. 3 points for, no points for, change the size and shape. If we were outside, there's lots you can do with games like AFL and soccer. In terms of, if I want them to use the width of the field, making sure they have to pass across 3 channels before they can have a shot. Little things like that we do as coaches in our club sports all the time. As you progress down, you introduce the principles of play as well. All of the physical activities that you can use in this unit have identified the 5 different areas of principles of play, and then each has the specific things for that physical activity in the syllabus identified. And as I said earlier, that's what we use to make that hexagon. Pick one. Again, you can't expect students in an assessment task to fix everything. But maybe what you could do is to say, I want you to think about the principle of play of creating, defending and exploiting space. In the syllabus, that's one of the dot points you have to be able to demonstrate to me. And they'll have to collect video evidence, or you'll have to collect that supplementary video evidence about all of those dot points, but they might just focus on one for an assessment task. Thinking about the affordances, when do I use that net lift, in what circumstances, and what does it take for it to be successful? And as I was saying, don't take away that decision-making and problem-solving element from what they need to do. Whether it be in you giving them the activity to get them engaged with it, or whether it be them creating something. You want them to create their own strategy to develop that principle of play. Well, they need to know, I've got to keep some thinking elements in there. It's not about making it so regimented that it's just a repetitive practice drill. That's when you introduce that notion of perception-action coupling that's in the syllabus. So when they can make decisions to solve the problems about where that shuttle is and what skill to use, and they're using their technique successfully, they make the link between what I see and what I do. And when they make that link, that's the success they take into moving their learning forward. So you've got to give them lots of chances and lots of practice at using their backhand clear, making decisions about their backhand clear, fixing their backhand clear as they keep trialling it through the activities that you set up, and eventually they'll work out, this is what I've got to do when I see the shuttle at this trajectory. This is the technique I use. That's what they'll take forward into improvement in their game. That is big chunks of the syllabus. And 2 or 3, 4 or 5 different active investigations that we have at the end of that chapter where you're doing that sort of thing. Setting up the context, getting the primary data about their weaknesses or their rate limiters, identifying 1 or 2 of them, thinking about the principles of play, getting them to design a training activity, a training strategy, trial it, collect the data, get them to evaluate and justify that data. Again, that's 4 or 5 weeks worth of work. But they're the big activities that we have at the back of each chapter that helps engage them with the first half to get them to the stage of being able to produce a successful assessment task. And there's the wording of one that you could use. That was a really quick fly through a whole year's worth of work, basically. And I could really only brush the surface and touch on a few different things along the way. But there's lots more in the textbook than what you will need. There's lots of all the subject matter is covered, and we have to cover all of it. But the activities that you choose to engage them with along the way, they're your choice about how do I get my students engaged with the learning and what do I do to get them up and head them towards that assignment. So here's the assignment in the second part of the chapter, or the one that you've created. Pick the tasks along the way that lead them in that direction. And hopefully there's enough tasks in that textbook along the way to get them heading and understanding the subject matter that they then can apply successfully to their assessment task. That's me. Any questions? I'm quite happy to hang around if people want to and ask about what we're doing in Year 10, how you're preparing students, what your ideas are, what you might be thinking about putting in. As Kim said, one of the things about our textbook is it does have the full 2 years, and lots of us are trying to put in tactical awareness stuff now into our Year 9 and 10 programs, and because you don't have much access to what it looks like in Year 12 yet, I would say that's one of the points of difference about our textbook. You can get it when it's released and put it in the Year 9, 10 stuff now. And as I said, I'm quite happy if people want to discuss what they're doing already. I'm not the expert in tactical awareness, that was John Clancy. So lots of the things that are here, you can obviously use this as a digital rather than a hard copy so that the students can have access and see it. But there's also the teacher resources that sit outside of that where you can access, as I said, one of those hexagons for everything. There's these GPAIs in there, as many as we can get in there. There is practiced formative tests that are combination exams for every chapter. So you can go sit them down in the first lesson and go, here's a 70-minute, might be a 60-minute test. And I've developed, I'm having another one of those blanks. What are the things we use these days at the back to mark them? ISMGs, yes, thank you. They're the things that I've developed a little ISMG that you can use with the formative, and then there's also a pre-assessment test. So and they're different to the end of chapter tests. So if you use the teacher resources, you've got a few different tests plus the other resources and stuff, which all you can get electronically, and yeah.